It's May of 2025. We are in a complete global meltdown of the markets. We have civil wars. All of this stuff, everything that's happening right now, I warned you of. I told you how to prepare for this. The signs were all there. The signs had been there. And I was telling all of you, this was going to happen. We are going to be in the next Great Depression, and here we are, 2025. We're in it. We have a global world war brewing right now. We don't even live the way we used to live just a few short years ago, and all of this could have been prepared for. But people didn't want to accept that this day was coming, and here it is. I can't time the market, and I couldn't have timed the markets back then. I couldn't tell you exactly when it was going to happen. Matter of fact, I thought it would have happened soon. So in today's video, I want to go back and recap all the different things that I warned about, all the different signs that were there, and all the different things that you saw from 2022 right to this moment in 2025. My name's Chris Naugle. This is What Now? I don't know what's next. For many of you, this isn't going to mean anything, but for some of you, this should serve as your lesson as to what you could have done to be in a different position, because for some, like myself, all of this, as bad as it is, I didn't even think it could get this bad, but it's still an opportunity because I was prepared, and some of you were also prepared. Those of you that listened to what we did just a few short years ago, the videos that we created for YouTube, told you how this was going to unfold. It just didn't tell you when and in what order, because that was unpredictable. So today what I want to do is just recap some of the things that had happened in the past, because if the past is any guide for the future, this might be helpful for you. So let's take a trip back. Let's take a trip back to 2008, because that's really, from my standpoint, where it really started to fall apart. See, in 2008, greed was a major part of lives. We got so used to the markets doing well. We got so used to real estate before the Great Recession just going up and up. And money was so easy. Everybody could get loans. Heck, people could get loans and mortgages that didn't even deserve them. Then all of a sudden, all the corruption, all the lies, and all the greed popped. That was the Great Recession. Some of you were too young to remember this, but I wasn't. I was a financial advisor, and I remember this happening. I remember watching my clients lose everything, but see, it wasn't just my clients. It was me too. I almost went bankrupt. And I remember the government struggling to try to stop this fallout, because that was the closest the country at that point, funny to think back to, at that point, that was the closest the country ever came to a complete meltdown of the financial system. But the government stepped in like they always had, right? And they printed a bunch of money. At that time, it was an unprecedented $900 billion that they printed for a stimulus. They bailed out some banks failed. Matter of fact, there was over 25 banks that failed during the Great Recession. And we thought, oh my gosh, this is terrible. But really, that was just the beginning. You see, after the Great Recession, as bad as it was for all of you that lost jobs, or your parents that lost jobs, you rebounded. Yeah, it was a tough time. You lost money, and if you stayed in the stock market, it took you about 8 to 10 years to get back what you had lost. But you made it back, and all was well again. And then we entered the next phase, which was a printing press glorified period where all that money that was printed during the Great Recession now made its way into the markets, and everything started chugging along and going up. We had a president, Mr. Trump, come in, or should I say President Trump. And although he was so hated, he won, and I don't know all the reasons why, I'm not into politics, but he won because he wasn't a politician, and most people wanted a change. And after that, there was more hate than I'd ever seen, more divide than I'd ever seen in the world. But at least the economy was humming along. The United States was becoming independent when it came to oil production. Things seemed really good. I even remember back then thinking, wow, we're really doing well as a country. And then there was an election, a controversial election, that created massive divide in the country. You all remember this. It was 2020. But you remember the divide starting in 2019. Every day in the news, it was hate. And that's all we got to see. hate and divide and lies and all these accusations of what the president did and what his rival did. And then all of a sudden you probably remember COVID. I'll never forget when I first heard about it. We were traveling around doing events across the country for our company Money School, which thankfully still exists today. And we were in Disney getting ready to put on a sold out event, and the President Trump, comes on and shuts the whole country down because of COVID. This virus that nobody knew anything about, but supposedly it was some lab in China by a wet market, and we didn't know, was it from a bat? Was it from one of the other animals that they were killing there? We didn't know what it was. We were scared. And I remember it hit, the country shut down, and all of a sudden you started hearing about the numbers going up and up. And it was a complete surprise to all of us. Businesses were shut down. Nobody could go to work. So everybody started working from home. But at that time, nobody knew what to do. I remembered it was weird. I'm not a type of person that can work from home. I wanted to go to the office. And I remember my office was shut down. They wouldn't even let me in until I finally came up with an excuse, not an excuse, but a reason. I'm in essential business. I'm in the media and I'm in insurance, which I was in both. We had MSTV back then. And I was able to go to work, but I remember masks. And I remember first it started with the race wars and the statues coming down and the divide, black versus white. And then after it was black versus white, they came out with a vaccine. And even then, I looked at the vaccine as a good thing. I was like, oh my God, this is gonna help people. This is gonna save people. But then the government, for some reason, well, actually, I'm missing a big thing. There was a change in presidents, a very controversial election. Many people say the election was stolen, but that was so long ago. I don't even really remember all the details. This is 2025, and how can I remember all that? But I remember it was controversial. And the new president came in and they were pushing the vaccine so hard. Literally, they were paying people to get the shot. And the shot was brand new. It hadn't really been tested. It was rushed because they needed to rush it because this pandemic, the COVID pandemic, was running out of control and people were dying, or so they said a lot of people were dying. That's also controversial. Even in 2025, we still don't know the truth about what really happened and what really didn't happen. But what we do know is we know that the government was pushing something, and it scared me, and it scared my family. And well, because we live in the United States of America, we have the ability to choose. And I chose not to. I chose not to travel. I chose not to go around people, but I chose not to get the vaccine. And now, boy, it's a good decision because shortly thereafter, a lot of the people in our family did get the vaccine. My sister was one of them, and they're no longer with us. Now, I'm not making any claims that it was because of the vaccine, but really, if we're a logical thinker and we really just connect the dots, it all makes perfect sense. But the pandemic gave way to a boom. Everything was falling apart during the pandemic, and then the government and the Fed printed an unprecedented amount of $5.1 trillion. You remember how I said in the Great Recession it was an unprecedented $900 billion? Well, during the pandemic, they printed $5.1 trillion. This is important because, folks, we were doing videos about this. We were telling you that this seems unnecessary. Not that the printing was unnecessary, not that there was stimulus that wasn't needed, but $5.1 trillion, when you really dug into the package that they were printing, there was so much in there that didn't make sense, that didn't seem to really align with why they were printing money. Old news now. But they did print $5.1 trillion. And when they opened the country back up, when they started letting us travel again, started letting us go back to our offices, very few people wanted to go back because the government was just paying them to stay home, and they would make more at home than they would here. This is an important lesson, and I was telling you about this. We literally created a society of people that didn't want to work. And this country was built off of hard work. This country was built off of the freedoms and the things that our ancestors at this point, but some of you, it was your parents. Some of you, it was your brothers and sisters. Some of you, it was your grandparents. They gave everything for the freedom we have. Well, that we had. Not only that, during that period of time, everything was booming after the pandemic. I remember they allowed us to take the masks off, and it was like party like it's 1999. I remember that. We thought the world was going to end. When the masks came off and everything opened back up, we were all over the place traveling. spending all sorts of money because during the pandemic, most people saved money, they paid off debt, so they were in a great position. They had stimulus checks that were given out of that $5.1 trillion. Businesses got PPP loans and EDIL loans. All this stimulus created a massive boom. I call it a bubble. You see, everything appreciated. It didn't matter what asset you talked about. It just seemed like there was no going back. We're just going to the moon. Crypto was going to the moon. Bitcoin was going to the moon. Cars, the first time in history where a used car was worth more after you drove it for a few years. Crazy stuff was happening. People were making tons of money on the stocks they were investing. It seemed like no matter what they bought, they made money. Their real estate and their houses and their investment properties were just going crazy. Man, looking back, it did feel like a party. Everybody was making money. It seemed really good, but I knew it wasn't. I knew it was an illusion. And I even called it a house of cards back then in those videos. And I explained why it's a house of cards and why there was no way it was sustainable. But it wasn't just me and my videos. It was people like Ray Dalio. It was people like Warren Buffett and Munger. It was all of the big ones that you should have been listening to, but you weren't because you were too busy out there living life. And I get it. We were locked up for a couple of years and now all of a sudden everything opened back up. We wanted to go out and do fun things. But then 2022, the reality started to set in. And this is only a couple of years ago, but man, it seems like it was yesterday. I remember talking about it. I remember talking about what the Fed was going to do to control the inflation because we were in runaway inflation. They didn't call it hyperinflation, but it was. We were over 9%, which means your dollars, because they printed so much, lost so much value that the price of everything went up. Everything cost more. And because there was so much demand, because, well, it was all pent up. Pent up demand is what you'd call it. People were just buying everything. They couldn't buy cars fast enough. They couldn't buy stoves fast enough. They couldn't buy everything fast enough. My God, there was shortages on everything. Toilet paper. You remember the toilet paper shortages? I still don't get that. But everything was doing good. And then all of a sudden the Fed said, whoa, we got a problem. But at first they said they didn't have a problem. It's transitory. Then they realized there was a problem and they took action. They vowed to slay the dragon called inflation. Well, how'd they do that? Well, they did it the same way they've always done it, folks. They started raising interest rates, but instead of raising them a couple times, they did something that I'd never seen in my life. They raised interest rates that year 7 times, which made it really expensive to buy things. We watched 30-year mortgages double in the course of 1 year. We also watched car loans double or even get more than double. We watched credit card interest rates go up. We watched everything go up. But the one thing in that year that we didn't watch go up was the interest rate on our savings. So if anyone had extra money in the savings account, which most people didn't because the annual or the average savings rate for people had plummeted in half during that short period of 1 year. People were saving a bunch during the pandemic because they couldn't go out and spend it. And then all of a sudden now they were saving half of that. And actually I think it was less than half. And people started using credit cards that year. Not that they didn't use credit cards before, but they were doing pretty good. But then all of a sudden, when the savings ran out, their credit card debt spiked. And I remember vividly talking about this in videos. I remember talking about how we were at record highs in credit cards. And I also remember telling people that in the past, if history is our guide, debt is what sinks all ships. But I called it families. And I started warning people that they got to pay down their debt. And I gave them the ways to do that. We had a system called the money multiplier method where we showed people how to pay debts off by just changing one thing. Some people listened, some didn't. And not only were families amounting mass amounts of debt from car loans to more big mortgages, because most people upgraded their house, the government, their debt was going crazy. And I remember all the other countries and the other leaders started noticing this. The US is just printing money. And then all of a sudden, power went out again. This happens a lot. We have these rolling blackouts quite often because, the government was pushing this agenda for EVs. Everything in a matter of just a few years was supposed to go to electric power, but the grid couldn't handle it. Well, hey, listen, it's back on. So right now, do yourself a favor. Let's just pause. Right down at the bottom is a subscribe button. Make sure you subscribe to this channel because you might not get another shot. And right up top, there's an alert button. Smash that alert button. God, I love saying that. I haven't said that in so long because we don't know when the power is going to go out for good. So you might as well get it right now. At the end of the year in 2022, after the Fed had raised rates, we started hearing about unemployment numbers. But you see, after the pandemic, so many people were laid off. Unemployment numbers were record highs during the pandemic, but when everything opened back up, everybody went back to work. When the stimulus and the unemployment checks ran out, people actually went back to work, and we were really looking good from an unemployment. Unemployment numbers were really low. Everybody was working, so much so that people couldn't even find people to run their businesses. Restaurants were struggling to find good employees because people there was other options, or they didn't even have to work, or they just got used to not working. It was a big shift. It was weird, but it was cool because a lot of new businesses started, a lot of innovation was happening. People were really pushing the envelope, but the envelope was starting to get hit hard because the rising interest rates in the Fed and everything they were doing. And I did mention the agenda of that administration back then, that was Biden. Back then, they were really pushing for EV. They wanted this Green New Deal, which became the Inflation Protection Act or something, which had nothing to do with inflation, but that's how they got the bill pushed through. And even Elon Musk, the owner of Tesla and SpaceX, warned, you can't push this big of an EV drive that fast because the grid can't handle it. A second ago, you saw how that worked out. But even before we got to this point where we just have massive blackouts all the time, it's kind of the norm. Back then, they were having blackouts. Even areas like Nebraska in 2022 were seeing blackouts. Nebraska? So if you owned an electric car in Nebraska where it's pretty freaking cold, or Buffalo, like where I'm still at, you would freeze to death. And then I'll never forget this one. Holy crap. 2022. I remember the New York governor, Kathy Hochul, not a good one. I remember her saying,
one of the problems we have are those gas stoves.
And I remember my wife saying, Chris, we got to replace our ovens. We got to replace our stove because we're not going to be able to get gas stoves anymore. I literally said to her, I said, sweetie, that's never going to happen. Are you silly? You think a gas stove is creating like problems with the environment? My wife was dead serious and she said, we're buying a new stove. And we did. And then we were putting a pool in the next year. And I remember her saying, we got to rush and get the pool heater because pretty soon we're not going to be able to have a gas-powered pool heater. You all know what happened, right? It wasn't just New York, but at that time it was. And it seemed crazy, but then all of a sudden in 2023, that really did happen. The last gas stove was sold. I remember the day. Orville's is the place we get our appliances. I remember you could no longer buy gas stoves, only electric. And then I remember them pushing that you couldn't have gas-powered heaters for your pool. Now that's a luxury item, but then all of a sudden it pushed over to electric power for your house. Then it gets cold in Buffalo, it gets cold in Nebraska. I'm thinking, holy crap, what are we gonna do? We're gonna heat our house with electric? And sure enough, it happened. And when the power goes out, you're screwed. And when it's cloudy in Buffalo or cloudy in Nebraska or cloudy anywhere, how are you gonna get solar power? All those windmills that they were putting up, they worked, but they wasn't enough. It wasn't enough to support that, and they pushed too fast. And now look at the problems we have. In 2025, man, we got all sorts of issues. They tell you when you can drive your car. They tell you when you can charge your car, because most of the cars out there, well, not all, but most of them at this point are electric. Most of those cars during these rolling blackouts just sit in the driveway and people can't go to work. They can't pick their kids up so their kids don't go to school. They can't really get anywhere unless they can ride their bike or walk. Listen, if I'm gonna look at the positives of 2025, at least people are out walking around more. They're riding bikes because they can't drive that electric car. I still drive a V8, happy to say that. And I remember back in 2023, I put a video out on Instagram about how I love my gas-guzzling bi-turbo V8. And I got so much hate. Everybody said I didn't know what I was talking about. Well, got that one right. Yeah, actually, that one got taken down. I had to repost it. They said it was the music, but it wasn't. I did videos, and I wasn't the only one, saying this will be the next Great Depression. Most people, even people that were in the business, said there's no way. This is just gonna be a little blip. I said, how can it be? We're at the end of a long-term debt cycle. We've never even seen one of these in our lifetime. We're also at the end of a short-term debt cycle. We're at the end of a technology cycle. I was listening to Ray Dalio, I still do today, and Ray Dalio was telling you where we're going. He even did pretty little cartoon videos. Do you remember them? Probably not. Telling you where we were going. He was also saying that China was gonna challenge the US as the dominant power, the world power. Should have just listened to the dude. Should have bought more guns. Should have got more ammo, because now we can't even get guns. Can't even get ammo now. That's not just a New York thing. There's a couple glimpses of hope out there, just like there was back then. I made it to 2023 where Texas and in Florida, like those are the last great hopes. And a lot of people, they migrated there from New York. A lot of people from California went to Salt Lake. They went to Texas. It was like a mass migration. But the thing I want to get back to in 2023 is the divide in the country continued. In 2022, it was black versus white. Then that wasn't working enough because people are like, this is silly, man. We're boys, we're friends. Like, this isn't as bad as the media is saying. Then all of a sudden it became vaxxed versus the unvaxxed. And that was a big one. There was a lot of tension. I'll never forget that. It was so weird. You couldn't even speak your mind, couldn't even talk about it. Today, I'm like, I'm unvaxxed. And some people are like, that was a good move. But other people are still like, you idiot, you're the problem. And then after that, the next one was the red versus the blue, the Republicans versus the Democrats. Listen, at this point, I think you all know, 2025, it was a problem with just politics, not just Republicans and Democrats. Yes, one was worse than the other, but we're starting to see that right now. And the scariest thing is, and I remember I didn't really say this in videos, but I thought this. I thought when Biden got in, and he's no longer in, actually, he's no longer with us. God rest his soul. But when he got in, I said, there may never be another Republican that gets in office. They own the media. They control the media. Anyone that challenges them, they try to destroy. And, well, you can kind of see what happened here in 2025. That hasn't gotten any better. The other thing that I remember in 2023, and I remember this vividly, I remember the talk of a digital dollar. Not a decentralized dollar, not a decentralized currency like Bitcoin, a government-run CBDC. And we did a bunch of videos on this. And we did a bunch of videos kind of not even knowing what we were talking about. We were just like, CBDC, it's gonna be this thing, it's gonna be digital, and the government's gonna control it, and it's not gonna be decentralized. Of course, the government owns it. Well, how you liking that now? Everything's digital. Now, it's not as bad as what I thought it was gonna be, but we have heard a lot of rumors here in 2025 of people that they don't want to do things or people that they want to control, they can. They just flip a switch. Oh, and how about those taxes now? You don't even need to file tax returns anymore. I guess listen, I'm trying to give some positives for here in 2025. We don't even need to file tax returns. Why? Well, it's because they know how much money we make. They know every penny because it's all digital, it's all tracked. So at the end of the year, the IRS just clicks a button and sends us a bill. Can't really dispute it because they track everything, they know everything. Yes, the tax code's still around. And yes, you can still understand the tax code and do planning like I did back a long time ago, and we did videos on that too about complex trust. So I'm still doing okay, but most people aren't. The stock market's completely fallen apart. I don't know, and we're 2025, I don't know if it'll ever rebound. I always used to say, it has different cycles, but I just don't see that we're gonna come out of this one anytime soon. It seems like we're just stuck at this level like Japan was back when they were stuck in stagflation, which is where we're at now. And when you look at it and you want to blame someone, who do you blame? Sometimes, I hate to say this, but I don't really care. Sometimes you got to blame yourself. We created that. Sometimes we got to blame ourselves. Digital currency, we helped that. We started using credit cards for everything. We no longer used cash. We would go to the restaurant and just pull out credit cards. When we were sending money to people, we used things like Zelle back in the day. Gosh, this is way back, but PayPal was a thing. And then it was Zelle, and there was Venmo and all sorts of other ones. That was all us helping the digital push and helping the government take full control of the dollar with this digital currency. I remember this thing called FedNow, and I actually thought it was gonna be a good thing. I think I even did a video on it. It's like, wow, we no longer have to wait for checks to clear. It wasn't a good thing. It was the precursor to the digital currency. They were testing how they were going to manage the means of exchange and the clearing of the digital dollar. God, I can't believe I didn't see that. But even if I did, it would have been too late, so it wouldn't have mattered. 2022 and 2023 is when we all started really hearing about AI. Remember that? ChatGPT, and then it was Google, and then it was Microsoft. It was like almost like an arms race, but it was an AI race. Everybody was racing to make the better AI. And I remember Elon saying, be careful, it can get too smart and learn too fast. And look, it did. Although it has helped, AI has allowed us as humans to push further, to do things we never thought possible. It has given us an intelligence that we never had in the prior years, as I remember. And now we have it, but now it's not there yet. But now it just seems like we actually might see Skynet. You're probably too young to remember that movie Terminator and Skynet, but look around. You got AI running McDonald's. That was actually just starting back in 2023. Do you remember when the first couple McDonald's went full digital? They went full like computered. Not even robots, it just went AI. You remember that? Look around. Like, it kind of sucks now. You go to get food and you talk to a computer. And the computer's smarter. Some of you probably like this. Computer's smarter than what the people were when they were running it, but you can't have those discussions. You don't see that smile. The computer never gets your coffee wrong. You know, you go to Starbucks and oh yeah, Starbucks is still around. And you're like, I want a venti Americano with extra soy. Back when it was people running Starbucks, I remember they'd get it wrong all the time and you have to call and complain. AI never gets it wrong. Man, my coffee has never changed. It's always the same. Your food's never any different. I miss that variation. I miss getting a bad meal at a restaurant that I always thought I got good meals at. I miss that. But that was the old days. Oh, and then there was the banks. How could I almost forget that? 2023, we started seeing weaknesses in the banks. And they blamed that on lots of different things. But we had Silicon Valley Bank, I think that was the first one that went down. And then another and another. And then it was just like dominoes. They all started failing. It was almost like every day. I remember sitting in this very studio, this very office, remembering and watching all the banks collapsing and thinking, oh, no big deal. The Fed's just going to print more money. But the Fed printing money is exactly why the United States is very close to losing its dominance and losing the reserve currency to China, to the yuan. All the years we were playing hooky, all the years we were just issuing debt, printing money, just thinking that, it was never going to end. All of a sudden, China was getting ready. China was making investments and saving. And now, 2025, we're probably not going to be the reserve currency in a very short period of time. I mean, look at it. Scary thought. This all started back then. Probably started way before that. It's just sick to think back to it. And back then, we had the war. Russia, Ukraine. I remember thinking, it's not on our soil. And the government started meddling in it, sending everything over there from money and everything else. And there was all sorts of conspiracies. They weren't conspiracies now that we look back. Money was just being stolen. The U.S. would give it to Ukraine and the president of Ukraine would just basically kind of create a little slush fund. Now, back then we didn't really think that was real, but now we do, don't we? And then we actually got pulled into the war. And here we are now. Here we are at the start of a world war, one that we never thought we'd be in again. But I don't even fear the world war because, I don't know. I should fear it, but it seems like it might be okay. But what's not going to be okay is the civil war that's starting. Come on, look around, folks. It's 2025. You're seeing it right now. We're in a civil war. We just don't know it yet. We're just not acknowledging it as a civil war. It's kind of like back in 2022, they wouldn't say that we were in a recession. We were in a recession. Most of you watching this, you're watching this because you're unemployed. The recession wasn't just a recession. It was the worst recession we'd ever seen, and it still is. We're still in the midst of it. So many of you don't even have jobs. I warned you of this. I told you this was coming. And I also said things like, if you want to get ahead of this, then figure out how to solve a problem. Get more than one income stream. Don't rely on the 401k to be there for you when you retire. Don't rely on the equity that you had in your house because it might not be there. Chances are real estate values are going to go down. And boy, did they ever. Boy, sad to say this, but it's actually been really good. Because see, I did prepare and a lot of you did, I hope. I've just been buying the real estate. People still need a place to live. There's all sorts of subsidies for rents. So we've been buying properties 30, 40, 50% off of where they were back in 2022 and 3. I didn't think it was going to fall that much. But I also didn't think that the stock market, when it was already down 20%, would go another 50% lower, but it did, didn't it? And it took so long this time, so long, longer than I ever saw in history. It took so long for people to realize there was a problem. And then all of a sudden, when they realized it, they sold, which drove the markets even further down. It was like mass chaos. I'm just like, you don't sell low, you buy low. And then when it's high, you sell, but nobody wanted to sell when it was high. FOMO and greed. I hate doing this video. I just wish we all could have just saw the signs like I did. It'd be a lot better. You know what the hardest thing for me was? Is I was telling all my friends, my closest friends, my best friends, I was telling my family members, my parents, not my mom. My mom always listened, but my uncles, my aunts, I was telling everybody, get out of the markets. This is coming. I was warning everybody, get your debt gone. And this is all, there you go again, the freaking blackouts. Folks, right now, please just subscribe to this channel. As we keep getting these blackouts, YouTube might never be here again. This might be the last time. Hit the subscribe button. Come on. Give me a like. I'm going out there and telling you the truth. I've been telling you. Hit the alerts button. There it is. Somebody was charging that EV. But what was it that I warned you about? What was it that I told you about in 2020, 2021, 2022, and 2023, and all the way through? I never stopped. I said, get rid of debt. Debt will sink you, and boy, did it ever for some of you. Get rid of the bad debts. I told you to reposition and get diversified within your investment portfolios. Only invest in things you know, like, and understand. I even went on and told you, pay yourself first. Start saving money. Stop spending. Stop living this extravagant life. Stop acting rich. How many of my friends bought Lamborghinis back then, huh? Where'd the Lambo go, man? Got repoed, didn't it? You shouldn't have done that. You should have paid the debts off, but you didn't because you wanted to act rich. But I told you not to do that. These are my friends. That's why I'm pissed about it. But they didn't listen. You know who did listen? You know, those of you watching this, you know, my friends aren't watching this, my family members aren't watching this. It's the people that didn't even know me. The people that said, maybe this guy, this Chris guy's got something. I'm gonna listen. Thank you for listening. Because I know you're just like me. You're seeing this whole terrible period of time. Yeah, it sucks, but you're seeing it as an opportunity. You're all doing better. You're all your own bank. You took control of your money. And that's something else I told you to do. I said, get control of your money. Change one thing, and that's where the money went. Look at insurance companies. It's 2025. Mutually owned insurance companies are doing great. Banks are still failing. Matter of fact, pretty soon, we're only going to have a couple banks, and they're going to be big nationalized banks run by who? That's right, the government. But insurance companies are still mutually owned. And those dividends on that specially designed whole life that I taught then and now I only teach, they've gone up, haven't they? Even when the markets have gone down, I told everyone, I said, every day you'll have more money than you did the day before. I don't get clients calling me up, getting mad that they got their statement and they made more money the next year than they did the year before. No, the clients that get mad are the ones that have a lot less. And that's just about, I can't imagine what financial advisors have been going through. Those clients are calling them pissed. Our clients with the stupid, specially designed whole life we always talked about, they're just like, man, I got more money than I had the day before. And not only that, I'm in control of my money. And not only that, I'm making investments. I'm buying things with my money. I'm the bank. I'm taking my money from my whole life and I'm going out there and I'm lending it out. Actually, I'm not lending as much anymore because there's not enough good people to lend you. But what I'm doing is I'm buying assets now, just like you. My gas guzzling V8 that everybody hated on, yep, that thing's bought and paid for. Because I became the bank, like I taught all of you to do. And I'm happy for you, I truly am. For everybody that didn't, you shoulda, you coulda, you woulda. That's what you're probably saying now. I shoulda, I coulda, I woulda. And as I go live here in 2025, I don't really know what to tell you to do. I'm giving you advice still, but I'm running out of things because like the opportunity was then. It was then. The opportunity now, well, we might just have to wait a couple more years. You might have to wait a couple more years because me and those that listened, we're carrying on. Things are actually good outside of the blackouts and all the nonsense out there in the political environment. But you know what? Other than that, we'll come out of this. Or will you? And this is the last topic, something I'm incredibly proud of. Some of you remember, I had this idea, this vision. And it came to me and I wrote it on a napkin for this company, this technology platform called PMC, Private Money Club. Yeah, now you know the name. Yeah, because now it's massive. But back then, it was literally an idea on a napkin. An idea that stemmed from putting people back in control of their money. Understanding that there was only two types of people with money and people that needed money. And people with money wanted to make more and people that needed money needed the money to do that. And I brought them together like a dating site. And back then, it was just a fun little thing we did for ourselves. For me and clients and some friends. It's massive now. We're taking the control back. And yeah, it's been tough because as we get bigger and bigger, I put more and more pressure on the traditional banks and they don't like that. I'm hoping, it's only 2025, but I'm hoping that one of those banks comes to us and says, we just want to buy this. And I got my number. I made a deposit slip out in 2022 for the amount I wanted to sell it for. And I'm just waiting for that number because you know what? Otherwise, I might end up face down in the Hudson. Because when you challenge big old banks and you challenge the institution, well, you're the bad guy. We haven't got there yet, thank God, and I hope we never do. But for those of you using Private Money Club, which is probably most of you, thank you. With that being said, folks, I'm gonna shut this broadcast down because I think we've heard enough. At this point, if you're not working on taking back control of your money, what money you have left, now is the time. I'm Chris Naugle. This was an episode of What Now? I don't know what's next. We'll see you next time.